to Leading the Way podcast, where you'll learn neuroscience-backed ways to lead more effectively and have more fun at work with what you already have. Hey there, it's Chris from Leading the Way, and I'm super excited with my awesome guest, Faris Aranki. Faris, thank you so much for being on Leading the Way. Really glad to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me, Chris.
Oh, my pleasure. Hey, folks, I want to tell you about Faris because he's a very accomplished CEO, runs a very interesting practice. So let me tell you a little bit about him, and we'll jump into some great content after that. So Faris Aranki is the CEO of Shiageto Consulting. It's a very innovative consulting firm that blends strategy and emotional intelligence together. He's spent over 20 years doing this work for various businesses all over the world. And he's experienced firsthand the fine differences between success and failure. One of the things he says is that, that fine difference and what often hinders institutions from getting their goals isn't the quality of their ideas, but it's their ability to engage effectively with others at all levels and remove those barriers in the way, which are things Faris is an expert on. To build up on his passion around this work, he started his own firm over 5 years ago called Shiageto Consulting, and that they help businesses and individuals improve their strategic effectiveness. On top of leading his company, Shiageto, he's also an accomplished writer, speaker, and contributor for a number of outlets. So we're really glad to have you here with us today, Faris. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. And it's a real pleasure, as I said. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're about to have.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that really drew me into you was you've got a formula, and I know you have a math background, so it makes sense you'd have a formula, but success is IQ times EQ times FQ, if I got it right.
You got it right, my friend. You got it
All
right.
right.
And you're right. You're right. My first career was as a high school teacher, math and economics. So I do love a formula, but this one makes complete sense. Actually, all formulas should make complete sense. But
Right.
let me unpack it for you and the listeners. So let's talk about those three components, right? IQ, EQ, and FQ. Actually, before then, let's talk about. Hey, to be successful in life, you need to first know where you're headed for, right? You need an objective, a vision, right? So often when we're working with clients, if they don't have that, we say, stop, let's work that out, right? Because you can't be successful at anything if you don't know what you're aiming for. Be it climbing Everest, be it getting fitter, be it learning a new language, anything, but have a clear goal. So to get there, right, you need these three components. The IQ, people might have heard of IQ. They might think Albert Einstein, but IQ in this case is come up with the best solution to get you wherever you want to go, right? Not the first solution. Too many people come up with the first solution, right? The best solution, which means lay out every option on the table, pick the best one. All right. So that's where the IQ comes. Come up with the best strategy, the best solution. But that's not enough. You can have a great idea, but if other people aren't bought into it, you're going nowhere. Right. That idea is just a piece of paper. That's where the EQ comes in. That's emotional quotient. Right. A lot of people might have heard of it called emotional intelligence. And that is the ability to get on with people, to get them excited, to see how their emotions are playing into your whatever you're telling them about. Right. Because watch and observe when you tell them about your idea. Are they excited? Are they sad? And, find out different ways to overcome those. So that's where the EQ bit comes in. Right. So have a great idea, take others on the journey with you. And then there's this third component, FQ, which many people wouldn't have heard of. That's focus quotient. Now, focus quotient is the ability to focus on things that are really important. Okay. Now, that in your day-to-day life, a lot of people say, oh, that's, not looking at my phone. Okay, that's kind of micro version. But the macro version is if you've set yourself a goal of doing something, don't be distracted by other goals. Don't be distracted by other noise. Have you prioritized? Have you set up your life? Have you set up your company to really achieve on that, right? Have you anticipated the barriers in your way and eliminated them before they even come? So that's the FQ. It is the ability to focus. So you need the idea, you need to take others on the journey, and you need the ability to focus. And that's why I put a multiply in between them, right? Too many companies, too many people I work with go, don't worry, we've got the smartest people here. So we've got really high amounts of IQ. And they go, that will mask the other two things. I said, no. It's a multiply for a reason, because anything multiplied by 0 is a 0, right?
Right.
So you can't mask it by having high IQ or high EQ, or you need all three.
That's so important. Yeah, I in my own career, and I'm sure others can share this too. We've been at companies where one of those things, as you said, is really strong. I've been at Silicon Valley where the IQ is off the charts great. And maybe the EQ was even good too, but the focus of what we were doing was a little bit all over the map. And you can get by with that for a time, but not a long time, right? And you're ripe for disruption if you don't have strength in all of these spots for sure. Can you talk about a client or maybe a fictional client to hide the names to protect the innocent that's
Yeah.
gone through this work and sort of the changes that they've seen?
Yeah. I mean, all our clients, we tend to initially come in under one pillar. So we might work, I work with and we offer different kinds of services. One is where we get in the middle and we sort of fill in the gaps of those missing IQ, EQ, FQ. The other one
Gotcha.
is we teach leaders, we train them to improve their skills in each of those areas so they can be effective.
Mm,
Let's take a classic high IQ situation where we needed to bring some EQ. We were working with a reasonably sized, fast-growing startup. The founder was a very technical engineering guy. He had built an amazing product because he loved building stuff. Now,
sure.
what he wasn't great at was communicating,
Okay.
right? Which is fine when you're a two-person, five-person, 10-person business, but he now had 80 employees
Mm,
and they were getting frustrated that they didn't get any communication from him around what the strategy was. More than that, a few of his leadership team, his management team, disagreed with the direction that he was taking the firm. But he was just head down building. Now,
mm,
we were actually invited in by the investors who had just given them a large pot of seed money. And, they're an old acquaintance. They said, Faris, can you go in and just sort this out? All right.
right.
Give them some things. So, and I realized instantly that there was this lack of EQ, which
Yeah.
was leading, therefore, to a lack of FQ because the founder had a very clear set of ideas, didn't communicate to anyone, and the rest of his management team thought they should do something different. And in fact, each of them, because there was no leadership, was going off in their own direction, briefing people, we should do this. Don't worry what you hear from this other person.
Yeah.
So what we really need to do was bring those people together and just in a very interactive way, get them to be honest with each other, get them to break through the challenges of the founder not being a great communicator, in fact, being quite, himself in his own words, emotionally still got a lot to mature. He's very
Sure.
mature. So he didn't like hearing, negative feedback around what he was doing. So
Sure.
creating an environment where it was okay. So building up high levels of psychological safety, saying, look, it's okay, share your opinions. And do you know what? Over the course of 3 workshops, we got them all on the same page. It was
Nice.
a massive relief for the founder. It meant just much more clarity for the 80 people out in the business and gave them a clear roadmap for 3 years on what to do, right? Whereas if we'd left them alone, I'm pretty certain that large pot of money they earned would have been spent here, there, and everywhere, and questions would have been asked. But it's a real pleasure to be able to do that kind of work, make an impact, not just for the company, but for those individuals, and take away some of that frustration.
Yeah, 100%. And for the investors and probably just the job satisfaction and not bringing home junk from
Yeah,
work, right? For each of those folks.
yeah.
I'm curious too, as you say that, those three things, we're all naturally probably strong in different ways. And yes, we can all build up our skills, but is some of your work building up, let's say someone is missing FQ or IQ, building that up in the team and the team beginning to trust each other with this formula?
Yeah, and it's amazing how interlinked these things are. If you can improve the FQ, that might improve the EQ.
Mm,
But yeah, certainly it's about filling those gaps in the short term, but teaching them how to be more logical. So let's take the FQ that you said. One of the
right.
biggest challenges in FQ that we work regularly in companies with is prioritization,
Sure.
right? Too many companies are doing too much,
Yep.
right? And it springs to mind a classic example, working with a firm, again, not a big firm, scale up. And I walked in on day one, talked to their CEO and said, how many strategic initiatives are you doing? And he opened up this Excel sheet and he counted, he said, it's 150, Faris.
Oh my goodness.
I said, yeah,
Whoa.
exactly. My reaction was your reaction. I said, how can 150 things be strategically important? Right. And he sat there and he logically explained a bunch of things. He said, well, this one makes sense because we need this, right? And this one makes sense because and I said, okay, that's the IQ talking. Of course they all make sense, but think of the workforce. How do they know on a day which of these things they should focus on, right?
Right.
You're telling them 150 things are important. No wonder people are stressed and you've got a low employee morale. I said, what we need to do is help you get rid of them. And he said, look, I know that on a theoretical basis, but I'm willing to let go of things. And it turned out, 30 of the projects were his pet projects, 30 were the CFO's pet project,
Mm,
right? So, it's one thing I could teach them all about what prioritization is, but that's where the EQ bit, the emotion. So what we did in that situation, I said, okay, give me all those projects. Give me all the information, the business cases you've written for each of them.
sure.
And I came back a week later and I turned each of those projects into a Pokemon card.
Nice.
Right. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a Pokemon card where they got a picture of a Pokemon
Yep.
and then they've got all the statistics of the Pokemons.
Right.
But instead of like creature statistics, we had the project statistics, right? So we had a
Nice.
picture and it said, how much is this project going to cost? How much revenue is it anticipated to bring in? How many employees is it going to, how much time? And then we sat in the boardroom, all the leadership team playing Pokemon for 2 hours,
Nice. Nice.
right? And you might be able to see where this is going. Now, several of the cards kept losing regularly, and the people who owned them were getting frustrated. And they said, "Well, it's not fair. My hand is got weaker cards." I said, "Well, there's a simple solution. Get rid of those cards, rid of them out of the deck. Right? If
Right.
they keep losing constantly, then they're no good cards." And
Right.
by doing this, it allowed them a manner to uh, reframe and unemotionally detach from these projects that had sort of been just lingering.
Right.
Right? So after 2 hours, we got down from 150 to 30 projects.
Nice.
Right. Now I
Nice.
said to them, look, there's a lesson there. Here's a prioritization metric. All we did really was rank things, right? So I can
Yep.
now teach you the theory and the tool that you can use, but it's about remembering this, that sometimes taking a different approach, coming together in a gaming format and a bit of fun is the way you can lead people through prioritization.
Yeah, that's a brilliant approach. I love the gamification because that annual, usually it's annual in companies, when you're looking at strategic portfolio project, it's just a drag out
Yeah,
sort of thing. And people's pet projects come through or priorities from year on end come through. And so that gets like smaller and smaller. I love gamifying it because that takes at least some of the emotion out. I'm sure people are going to attach themselves to their favorite Pokemon card.
of course.
Right. But what a great way to do prioritization and a lot of fun. I might have to steal that from you. That's a
Feel
great
free,
way to do
unashamedly
it.
borrow ideas. Just reference me. It's all good. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I'm
Absolutely.
I'm I'm forever hopping back to my first career as a school teacher to think, how can I break through? Because that's often what it took with the kids. When you're teaching algebra to an 11-year-old who sits there telling you he hates algebra, go, okay, all right, thanks, buddy, for that info. Don't worry, you will learn. You might not realize you're learning because you'll be having so much fun.
Right.
Uh, And so I often hop back to that time and say, well, how can I apply this in the C-suite? How can I apply this to senior leadership teams? Because you know what? We're not that different to the kids we used to be.
No, absolutely. You're meeting them where they're at and helping them learn something. And that's a great thing for those executives to remember that, reading a PowerPoint with a vision statement on it probably is not going to have the effect that you would like it to, right?
Yeah.
You've got to make a little extra effort to package that in the way people can receive it. And it's just a little tweak, right? I mean, it takes effort to make Pokemon cards and all that. I'm not making light of it, but it's better time spent doing that than 8 hours in the boardroom and not moving the dial at
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
yeah, what a great approach. What all this work is iterative and custom to the client you're talking and working with. But I'm curious, are there any sort of, hey, every leader right now should think about this that comes to mind as you approach problems?
Yeah. I mean, probably the one thing it all comes back to, or a lot of it that comes back to, particularly in the EQ space, which is, let's be honest, the biggest pillar that we go in and help. But
Sure.
as much as I love to think we can, there's plenty of smart people out there, and yeah, we do some funky stuff like stress testing, wargaming. But in the EQ space, the number one thing we keep coming back to teaching leaders and working with leaders is their need to flex their style.
Mm,
Too many leaders, even great leaders, have a dominant style that they rely on perhaps a little bit too much. And what I'm talking about here is when you need to transfer an idea to somebody else, and it could be just over a casual conversation, or even we tend to just go with our natural style, right? But
mm,
really effective people are able to flex through at least four different styles, and there are four main styles effortlessly, because you will reach a point where your style doesn't just not work on the other person.
right.
Right. And so you need to effortlessly switch to another style that just seems so smooth and carries on the conversation and gets them excited by your idea.
Nice.
You know, a classic example is you meet many lawyers, engineers, accountants. They will use a very logical style with you. You know,
Yes.
you should do A for the following reasons, right? Bang, bang,
Right.
bang. They'll bang out reasons. But you come across a Donald Trump or similar who says, I don't care about your facts, or your facts are different to my facts. Then your logical approach just goes out the window. So
Right.
what's plan B, right? What's plan C? That's what we work with leaders to do. And it's amazing, even the most accomplished leaders haven't invested the time to develop those other styles.
Yeah, it's so well said too. And just geeking out for a second, the brain science shows that a lot of our decision making is made in our limbic system, which is all emotion. And actually, the notion of the language we're communicating around doesn't actually exist in that region in our brain. So,
Yeah,
as logical, and I'm a classically trained engineer by trade. Yeah, we have proof, 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 and that thing at the end. But as logical as that sounds, and great as it sounds, we're emotional decision makers, right? So
yeah,
it's so important to kind of honor that's where things are at sometimes. And
yeah,
as important as the logic is, and the science is, that you've got to appeal to the emotional side of folks, or what they're going through, to really get a great result. Yeah, it's
yeah.
such a great point.
It is.
So
It is.
there's a lot of shifting gears just a little bit. There's a lot of kind of stress on the system and our financial systems right now, right?
Yeah,
Inflation's at an all-time high around the world. Um, I don't know if stressors are more or less. It seems like every year, it seems like there's different conflicts, wars, battles around the world, sadly, but feels like there's more right now,
okay.
with Ukraine, with Taiwan, with all these other stressors going on, election year in the States. Um, and certainly layoffs of larger numbers than we've seen in a while, of like the Magnificent Seven. And so it can create a lot of stress on the system, both for folks that are being laid off and having to figure out their next steps, and then also the leaders that are left. I won't say holding the bag, but I can't think of a better word in the moment. But they've got a
Yeah,
team that's smaller, maybe not the ideal skill set, and still need to deliver. How does the formula in your work apply when there's a lot more stress on the system?
yeah. I mean, the formula still applies wholeheartedly, right? And I always talk about the formula operating both at a company level and an individual level.
Mm,
So, you know, the let's take that when you're under much more stress, the IQ part is got to go move into working smarter,
yeah,
right? It's got to be right. How can we get more bang for our buck? And I often telling people there's always a free activity you can get. You can always and one of the biggest things I had to learn when I set up my own company was to lower my own quality expectations. You
okay.
know, I come from a world of strategy consulting where you sit at a desk till 3 in the morning perfecting slides because that's
Mm,
what you. But I realized clients didn't really care when I moved
right,
into this world, right? So some of the IQ is actually saying the 80/20 rule, all that stuff, that additional stuff we were doing is nice to have, right? And do not underestimate how much of EQ that requires to let go of that, right? It's a bit
right,
like Pokemon cards going, send a slide that might have a typo in it, or send a slide that isn't all aligned left, right? And you're like, actually, the impact you're making is from the conversation around the slides, not the actual slides, right?
right,
Right. So in the IQ pillar, it is really being ruthless and saying, what is delivering the value, right? Let's really crank up the levels on our thinking around here. And what's the free bonus activity? On the EQ level, it's really understanding yourself, right? So turn your EQ on yourself. How do you act under stress? How do
mm,
you get back? How do you pump up your resilience and your positivity? Because the worst thing is to be in a slump. And I've been there, right? When I started a company, I realized my mindset was probably the single greatest determinant of the company's success. Because
wow,
in the early days, when it was all on my shoulders, if I was having a bad day, the next conversation would go worse. Then that would lead to the next conversation. And ultimately, it meant it just, and those conversations were about the business. It would mean no business would come in. And I learned I have to be on top of my mindset where when I'm feeling in a bad place, how do I get back there? So in the EQ really becomes about yourself. And as a leader, look to your team, really be sensitive to their emotions. When are they down? How can I get the team back up? What are the motivators for this specific group of individuals? And then the FQ is, as you hinted, there are less people to do the old tasks. So you've got to be even more ruthless. If you go back to that Pokemon, it's not the luxury of 30 projects, it's the right 10 or no more. Right.
right.
And you've got to be even more focused, even more FQ. So So it is not, as you indicate, it's not easy, but the equation does bear out. And actually, we find with clients having the equation allows them to start conversations that they might otherwise find difficult. Hey,
Yeah.
we've just gone through a redundancy program. We really need to be even more on top of our RFQ. And I didn't realize this until I had a trademark dispute around the equation.
Oh, wow.
So a big global company, I won't name names as we settled, sort of challenged this equation. Said, look, it's too close to something we do, and we got embroiled in a legal battle. Obviously, I'm small fry. I thought I
Right.
could, I could, but I thought I could resolve it with a few phone calls. It turns out I had to hire a bunch of lawyers. It was
Wow.
tens of thousands of dollars of fees, and I was going to give up because I was a small company. But actually, one of my clients said, "Hey, look, we love this formula. This is what we talk about in our company. This
Yeah.
has been a game changer. Don't give up. This is your identity. This is a beautiful language." And I said to him cheekily, "Well, will you pay my legal fees?" He said, "No." He
They
said, "I
don't
won't
love
do
it
that.
that
But
much.
Faris, what I will do for you is I'll sign a contract for your next piece of work with us if that gives you some cash flow to and So I know this equation, going back to your question, is just as pertinent in stressful times as in good times.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I love as you're talking about it too, a couple of things. One is it can feel like there's squishiness with EQ and FQ and these things, right? We develop KPIs for our cost centers and our call centers and profit and margin and supply chain, right? We can get really specific on that, but it's harder to get specific and measure on or can be. So this gives you a formula or at least like a litmus test of how we're doing in all of these three. And then, as you said so well, as a leader, how you are personally reflects greatly on the success of the company, big or small, I think. It gives you a personal sort of guidance, like how am I on these three, like right now? And what can I do right now to boost one of these or step away, right? Phone a friend and get away for a sec if you need to. But
Yeah.
what a great tool. I think it's really powerful. How would folks listening to this saying, "Oh gosh, I resonate with this, and I want Faris and his team to come in." What's a great way for the folks to reach out and engage with you?
Hey, it'd be great if people think that way. If they just want to carry on the conversation, right? There's two main places, two main channels to do that. First is visit our website. So the company's name is, as you said, Chris, is Shiageto. And so the website is www.shiageto.com, and I'm sure we'll put that in the notes.
Absolutely.
For those who are wondering, Shiageto or Shiageto is the Japanese word for a sharpening stone. It's the stone you use for the sharpest finish on any blade.
Mm,
Hopefully people will understand that's a metaphor for what we're doing with our equation to help you become sharper.
nice.
And the second place is come and find Faris Aranki. That's me on LinkedIn. There's only one of me. I'm on there a disproportionately large amount of time, as my family keep telling me. But I do reply to every message and I post every day. And it's a great place to pick up the conversation.
Awesome, Faris. That's excellent, and highly encourage guests listening to check out Faris. He's a dynamo. He's got great experience and super creative ideas like Pokemon cards to do your prioritization and many other tools. So definitely recommend you seek him out. Before we close out this
Yeah.
session, I always love to ask guest Faris, what's something you're thankful for right now?
Do you know what? I am thankful. It's a big year, right? Globally, and you talked about all those stresses and pressures. I'm grateful that some of them haven't bubbled over.
Hmm.
And here in the UK, we've just had our election, and we've had a beautiful transition of power. It flipped
Nice.
governments, and it gives me hope at how the two political parties that differ quite differently, very statesmanlike, transferred power, and all that gives to us as a population, and as an economy.
Yeah, it's so important. And yeah, absolutely. What a great example of, leading and looking at the bigger picture and not getting caught up in our personal stuff. That's so powerful. And I agree with you. It's great to see that. Thank you so much, Ferris, for being on. It's been an absolute delight. And to all the listeners, make sure you subscribe and like and do all those wonderful things so you'll see more awesome content like this in your feed, and keep leading the way. Thank you for listening to Leading the Way podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss other great episodes like this one. And if you're ready for more in your workplace, be sure to go to aintent.com. You'll find lots of free tools, assessments, and ways to engage directly with us to get your own epic results. We'll see you there.